Como ha dicho bien la reina, en el mundo hay más de 3.000 millones de personas que no tienen acceso a Internet, que aunque quisieran estar conectados, no pueden estarlo. Este es uno de los retos a los que nos enfrentamos para alcanzar un desarrollo inclusivo, no dejar a nadie atrás, y para ello es muy importante que las personas como las que acabamos de escuchar desde Colombia puedan estar conectadas no solo en su comunidad, sino incluso aquí. Y para hablar de ello, contamos hoy con un panel de altísimo nivel. Pedimos que suban al escenario Mats Granryd, director general de GSMA, bienvenido, y también Javier Flores, ¿dónde lo tengo? Por aquí. Aquí Javier, por favor, aquí Mats. Director general de la Fundación Microfinanzas BBVA, como todos conocéis. Desde Londres tenemos ya conectado a Niels Masterson. ¿Qué tal, Neil? ¿Nos escuchas bien? Es el director general de OneWeb. Y tenemos desde Seattle a Greta Bull, que es la directora de Empoderamiento Económico de la Mujer de la Fundación Bill y Melinda Gates. Gracias por acompañarnos esta tarde aquí en Madrid. Comenzamos con una ronda rápida, una pregunta que os quiero hacer a todos. Es una pregunta que os ruego que respondáis de forma breve. Es una pregunta personal y es: ¿qué os mueve para impulsar cada día un mundo más conectado e inclusivo? Mats, empezamos por ti.
Well, first, Your Majesty, distinguished guest, it's an honor to be here and to represent the mobile industry as GSMA. And I'll be brief. What really unites me and makes me tick and wants to go up in the morning is to connect people and understand the positive impact that connectivity has. We saw in the video how important it is to be able to transfer money, transfer funds, and we have plenty of statistics that proves exactly that. And the Majesty the Queen went through some of the statistics, but I have more that I can talk about later. But also, there are other things that are uniting us, and I remember a trip to Tanzania before the pandemic, and we were going out far out into the woods and visiting one of these small villages. And we stopped for a cup of coffee. I walked out to the car and opened the boot of the car, and there was a football there. And I took out the football, and maybe I bounced it once or twice on the ground, and all of a sudden all these kids came running, maybe 6, 8 years old, this size. And I just said, Real Madrid. And they say, no, Club de Madrid instead, the other football club. So even football can unite us, which I think was pretty fun.
Thank you very much. Neil, ¿qué te mueve?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Your Majesty, for your introductory comments, and also to the panel and the distinguished guests here. I very much appreciate the invitation. From my perspective, I've been very fortunate in my career. I've traveled extensively and also worked in in a number of the world's great cities. And in those cities, connectivity leads to opportunity. And when I think about connectivity, particularly in an increasingly connected world, connectivity becomes a byword for equality. Equality of education, equality of healthcare, and also equality for opportunity. And I think we've heard the stats already. Half the world doesn't actually have access to this connectivity, and therefore access to this opportunity. But also important, if I may, businesses around the world, I think 90% of all businesses around the world are small, medium-sized enterprises, and they employ half of the people around the world. And of those businesses, half of them do not have access to good quality connectivity either. And so if we want to raise all societies and raise equality and raise opportunity, this is why it becomes so important for all of us to drive this connectivity around the world.
Greta, ¿a ti qué te mueve?
Good morning from Seattle. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, good morning from Seattle. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for this invitation. It's a real pleasure to be with you here. I thought this was a really interesting question, and I had to really think back about, what originally got me into this. And it sounds a bit trite, but I guess my main motivation is really around building a better world. And I thought back to the beginning of my career many years ago in the old Soviet Union. So I lived in Ukraine for about 5 years, from 1990 to 1995. And the thing I noticed when I first arrived was how cut off everybody was from the rest of the world. And the second thing I noticed was how low living standards were, despite the fact that the population was incredibly well educated. And this lack of connectivity, this being cut off, just completely shaped people's worldview and sense of opportunity. And so the ability to connect people across geographies and income segments has just been incredibly important to me since that time, driven by a desire for everyone to have access to a decent standard of living and to be connected to others in the rest of the world. Since that time, I've worked in many other parts of the world, most of which have much more severe problems with extreme poverty than the former Soviet Union. But you can see in all of those cases how being cut off really keeps people away from opportunities. And so I've spent most of my career working on bringing people into the global economy, the financial system, so that we can give people economic opportunities that will raise the votes for all. And I think, the last 5 years, in the last couple of years in particular, has been an important lesson in the importance of connectivity and inclusion.
Muchas gracias, Greta. Javier.
Bueno, yo primero buenas tardes a todos y muchas gracias a Su Majestad por apoyarnos como siempre. Yo simplemente me gustaría decir, vivimos en un mundo hiperconectado. Debido a la labor, ¿no?, que desarrollamos en la Fundación Microfinanzas BBVA, cuando vamos a América nos damos cuenta de que esa hiperconexión, ¿no?, o ese acceso a la tecnología no es igual para todo el mundo, ¿no? ¿Y qué nos mueve? Nos mueven las personas que vemos allí, ¿no?, las caras, los ojos de hombres, mujeres y niños que no tienen acceso al siglo XXI. En ese sentido, sí me gustaría dar dos pinceladas de una historia. Ceneris Spitia es una emprendedora nuestra que vive en un territorio en el departamento de Antioquia, en Colombia, y se dedica a proveer de Internet móvil en aldeas que están totalmente alejadas, poblaciones que carecen de transporte público y a mucha distancia, 50-60 kilómetros del centro urbano más próximo, ¿no? Esta señora es capaz de llevar Internet a una escuela y abrirle la ventana del mundo a una escuela de niños que durante 2 horas al día pueden disfrutar del Internet. Eso es una razón muy poderosa, ¿eh? Los niños que son el futuro, ¿no?, la educación. Por otro lado, simplemente una anécdota, en un viaje en 2018 con el presidente de BBVA, con Carlos Torres, fuimos a visitar en Soacha, 23 kilómetros del centro de Bogotá, a una emprendedora, Jessica Hernández, que vivía en un cerro, en una casa que no tenía ventana, tenía techo de chapa, carecía de un suelo, no tenía baño, pero esta señora tenía en un poste colgado de la casa un módem que le permitía el acceso a Internet. Este tipo de cosas nos indican que el acceso a Internet, primero, es un derecho básico de todas las personas y es una condición indispensable para conseguir un desarrollo sostenible y verdaderamente inclusivo, y por eso lo hacemos.
Pues vamos a empezar ya con el tema de este panel y empiezo por Mats. GSMA representa a cerca de 750 operadores de telefonía móvil en el mundo y a casi 400 empresas del sector y, por si ustedes no lo saben, organiza el Mobile de Barcelona. Según uno de vuestros últimos informes, el número de personas que accede a Internet ha aumentado mucho durante la pandemia. Mi pregunta es, ¿cuáles han sido los avances en términos de conectividad en el mundo y específicamente en América Latina?
Yeah, so connectivity has improved and increased quite dramatically, but maybe we should just go back a little bit in time and set the big scene. Mobile operator globally, 750 roughly in the world, that's it, and they are by and large members of GSMA. Roughly 5.2 billion subscribers, so 2/3 of everyone on this planet has a mobile phone. That's different than to be able to access internet, because 2G, the first standard, you cannot access internet meaningfully. So that's the difference. Roughly $4.4 trillion in economic value. So if we would be a country, we would be the size of Germany. Huge amount of money. And with that power comes, of course, a great responsibility. And we are now entering into an era of what we call intelligent connectivity, which is the combination of 4 things: 5G, AI, IoT, and big data. If you put them together and mix them, you have something that is absolutely magnificently powerful. And you can exchange 5G for 4G, but still very, very powerful. We also know that it sort of takes 10 years for a technology to mature and a 30 years or so of lifespan. So 5G is just around the corner. We know it's being built out. In Spain, it's sort of 80% population coverage of 5G. In Latin America, much further away, much further away. We have 170 live networks in 70 countries globally. It's picking up quite a good pace throughout the pandemic. It's actually gone quicker than what we thought. And if we see what's happening in Latin America, if you go back 6 years, there were 31% of the population that had a coverage of 3G. That is now 87%. So almost 90% of the population of Latin America has access to 4G. And 3G is even more, that's 96, 97%. 5G will come, and I always say that it's not a race. This is a matter of maturing and making sure that the market conditions are optimal for when you are launching a new technology. So from a connectivity perspective, the connectivity is there. We're talking about access that we need to qualify, and I'll come back to qualifying that in a bit.
Me gustaría preguntarte también cuáles son los grandes desafíos y obstáculos a los que nos estamos enfrentando. Desde tu punto de vista, ¿qué es lo que para esta expansión de la conectividad?
Yeah, so if we then take this access bit, the half of the world is connected to internet and the other half is not. So let's look at the other half. From a coverage perspective, it has reduced dramatically over this past 6 years from 1.8 billion people not having access at all to any mobile broadband. 1.8 billion. That number is now down to 450 million. 450 million people live outside a mobile broadband coverage. There's no way for them to access internet. The other gap, the big gap, is the usage gap. So we have coverage, but I choose not to connect myself to internet. And that is a whopping 3.4 billion people. And that 3.4 billion people, go back 6 years in time, is unfortunately the same. It has hardly changed at all. So when we say access, it is really the usage that we need to fuel. And the Majesty the Queen was on it about affordability, skills, stigma. I know it's all bad things happening on internet. We need to change that. But I would also argue that it is a big portion of that. There's nothing there for me. I have money. I know how to use it. I'm not afraid of internet. But why should I go there? I've seen what President Pedro Sanchez looks like, but that's it. What is their benefit for me being there? So we need more local innovation at the edge, if you like, to drive the good, smart applications. You cannot sit in Stockholm, where I'm from, or London, or New York, anywhere else, and come up with great ideas. You need to be out there. That's a big challenge, I think.
Gracias, Mats. Todos estos desafíos y obstáculos se acentúan cuando hablamos de mujeres. Greta, desde tu experiencia en el ámbito del desarrollo y del empoderamiento de la mujer ahora en la Fundación Bill y Melinda Gates, ¿por qué las mujeres siguen siendo las más afectadas por todas estas barreras y esa brecha de la que también hablaba la reina?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge and builds a little bit on what Mats has said. I think first, let's start with why this matters. The internet has long been a gateway for access to financial services. We've been working on that as an industry for a long time, but it's increasingly becoming a gateway to the digital economy, which means that people can find work and selling opportunities online. So if our goal is ultimately to increase women's opportunities to earn and control a decent income, it's crucially important that we get women online and armed with the kinds of tools that will help them to generate a sustainable income, which helps them and their families. But as we all know, there are many barriers to this, right? So just to name a few, we've been talking about this for a long time, but there's a persistent 9% gender gap in access to an account. We know this from the Findex. I'm hopeful that when the Findex comes out next year, we might actually have shrunk that gender gap, but it has happened in every single Findex since they started doing it. There's also a gender gap in mobile phone ownership, and a very good report out from the GSMA not that long ago really quantified that, right? So in terms of just ownership of a phone, women are already 7% less likely to own a phone, and 15% less likely to own a smartphone, which is where you get access to the kinds of opportunities that are increasingly available online. And what that means is that we have 374 million women worldwide who are completely unconnected. But even when women have phones, they may not have sole access to that phone. They may not know how to use that phone. They may not have experience in using it, and they may not even have the language to use the phone. A huge proportion of the websites in the world are in English, then Spanish, then French. But like many poor women don't speak those languages, and so there's really very little content. So speaking to the point that Matt's made earlier about the usage gap, we need local language usage. We need voice activated systems and lots of different things that will make it easier for people to get on board. And so, there is a huge gender gap in use of the mobile internet, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And, nearly 1 billion women worldwide have absolutely no access to the internet. And given how much economies are moving online, which has been accelerated by the pandemic, women potentially falling even further behind. And then just one last comment is, there's the old kind of bogeyman of social norms, which has been really vexing in terms of getting women into the digital economy. And we have to talk about that. It's hard to talk about in a very general sense because social norms differ from country to country. But one of the interesting facts that did come up in GSMA's survey work globally was around what's driving that gender gap in both access and usage of mobile internet. And for women, those were literacy and skills, affordability, and importantly, safety and security, which is really an important thing that we need to sort of think about as we develop services for women online, because that last one wasn't a concern for men. It really is a concern for many women. And that can be very contextual, but it's still, I think, something we need to address.
Por eso crees, Greta, que aumentar esa conectividad, empujar esa conectividad, puede acercar a un mayor número de mujeres a Internet.
Yeah, I think we really have to work on connectivity because we won't have full equality and we won't have economic growth if women are not able to access the internet. If you're able to connect to information to a bank account that you have control of and you have the ability to make and receive payments, you can connect to markets, and all of those things together have an amazingly liberating effect for women. Imagine, if you're cut off and working at home and just doing kind of life-changing to be able to earn an income. That income goes into your digital wallet, your bank account. You control it, and it makes things work a lot better for women. So, women, when they're connected, are able to understand what's happening in the world. They can get better prices for their goods. They can receive social payments or transfers from distant relatives. They can buy and sell goods online. They can find work opportunities. So there are so many things that are really important in terms of connectivity and bringing women into the digital economy. And just to come back to this old question of social norms, in the gender inclusion community, there's a lot of concern about how we deal with social norms, but I think it's important to remember that these are changeable. Not so long ago, the social norm in the United States or the UK was that, women couldn't have credit cards in their own names, or they couldn't stay in a job once they had children. Once women started getting out of the house and earning an income, it just became self-evident that those norms did more harm than good. And society benefited from women playing a more active role in the economy. So the US Federal Reserve did a study not that long ago that estimated that women entering the workforce since 1948, and they measured this to 1990, contributed 0.5% annually to US GDP. And since 1979, the majority of the rise in household incomes was a result of an increase in women's participation in the economy outside of the home. So it is really crucial, not only to the empowerment of women and bringing everybody online, but to economic growth. And as we think about building back after this pandemic, we have got to get people connected so that they can make that contribution. And men and women both need to understand that women joining the workforce is just an important pathway to taking people out of poverty in emerging markets.
Muchas gracias, Greta. Javier, precisamente en este contexto y con estos desafíos, la Fundación Microfinanzas ha desplegado 2 programas pilotos en Colombia y Perú, que conocemos bien, para llevar la conectividad a las zonas más remotas, como hemos visto en Urumita. Cuéntanos por qué una fundación que se dedica a las microfinanzas ha decidido instalar antenas, como ha pasado durante este periodo de la pandemia. ¿Cuál ha sido la mayor motivación para intentar impulsar este proyecto?
Muy bien, gracias, Ana. La verdad es que nosotros en la Fundación iniciamos la transformación digital hace ya unos años y la pandemia, la crisis provocada por la pandemia puso de relieve realmente que el tema digital se convirtió en un elemento que producía desigualdades, pero era una oportunidad, ¿no?, para reducir esas brechas que se producen a día de hoy entre los que más tienen y los que no tienen, ¿no?, recursos. En ese sentido, nosotros impulsamos durante el año 2020 el app de banca móvil que lanzamos en Colombia, en Perú y recientemente en República Dominicana, en el que tenemos más de 400.000 clientes que ahora mismo tienen acceso al banco a través del celular. Para que te hagas una idea, estamos haciendo a día de hoy en Colombia 1.300.000 transacciones digitales al mes, ¿no?, y el 77% de los clientes que tienen crédito con la Fundación utilizan los canales digitales. Todo esto ha sido un impulso muy grande, pero nos dimos cuenta en ese proceso, ¿no?, de transformación digital acelerada, que hay zonas remotas, zonas donde, como se ha dicho aquí, se ha comentado por parte de mis compañeros de panel, a pesar de haber muchas veces conectividad, no se usan los servicios digitales, ¿no? Entonces, vimos que había o una conectividad deficiente o que había zonas donde se carecía de conectividad y veíamos que con nuestro modelo, apoyado en corresponsales bancarios, podíamos incorporarle un nuevo valor añadido a ese corresponsal que, más allá de poder permitir hacer determinado tipo de transacciones, el que a la hora de ponerles una antena con conexión digital, podíamos dar conexión digital en un radio de acción alrededor del corresponsal. Y de este modo poder proveer y empezar a bancarizar a gente desde lo digital, desde el inicio, ¿no? El que pudieran abrir una cuenta, el que pudieran hacer sus transacciones, que pudieran pagar sus cuotas en ese corresponsal, pero vía un celular. Y pensando, como también se ha comentado aquí, que es muy importante que haya conectividad, que haya cobertura, pero que también es tan importante como eso es construir los skills, las habilidades, para que estas personas se familiaricen y puedan utilizar Internet. Hemos habilitado en estos corresponsales bancarios unas pantallas en las que nuestros emprendedores pueden dar cursos, dar formación. En un segundo momento será a nivel individual, pero en este momento los estamos dando ese apoyo y esa capacitación con reuniones de grupo de emprendedores en ese corresponsal bancario, donde 2 días a la semana estamos haciendo reuniones en las que estamos empezando a hacer que estas personas se familiaricen con el uso de la tecnología.
Me comentan ahora mismo que hemos tenido un fallo de conexión y hemos perdido a Greta de momento, pero vamos a continuar en el acto. Si no la veis, intentaremos recuperarlo en unos minutos. Quería preguntarte una cosa más. Sí. Tú, que nos has explicado muy bien estos 2 proyectos, has tenido la posibilidad de visitar in situ estos proyectos tanto en Perú como en Colombia. ¿Qué está suponiendo este proyecto que habéis desarrollado en las comunidades y en el entorno familiar de los propios emprendedores?
Yo te diría que ha sido una revolución, ¿no? Ha sido una revolución porque estamos yendo a aldeas muy pequeñas, estamos yendo a zonas en las que hay 400, 500 personas que están olvidadas de la mano de Dios, donde no existe infraestructura, ni física ni tecnológica, no existe. Y estamos trayendo las ventajas del siglo XXI a esos lugares, en la selva, en el altiplano peruano. Claro, esto ha supuesto un cambio muy importante. Estas personas normalmente, cuando tienen que hacer algo, se tienen que desplazar a un municipio que está a 50, 60 kilómetros, pero que a uno no le toma el tiempo que nosotros pensamos aquí en los países desarrollados. Hacer 50 o 60 kilómetros en la selva o en la montaña te lleva una jornada de trabajo, y eso supone cerrar tu negocio, renunciar a esos ingresos durante ese día y privar a estas personas de algo que necesitan, ¿no?, que es su propio sustento. En ese sentido, les estamos facilitando la vida, pero no queremos solo facilitar la vida desde el punto de vista de darles servicios financieros y apoyar a sus negocios, sino que, insisto, estamos pretendiendo darles formación en habilidades digitales, en temas de empoderamiento para las mujeres. Estamos intentando hacerles construir un módulo sobre fortalecimiento empresarial de sus negocios para que no solo tengan acceso a servicios financieros, sino que además esto pueden complementarlo con una formación que no solo les permita familiarizarse con el uso de lo digital, sino que además les permita capacitarse. Te diría que en estos momentos es un proyecto muy incipiente, lo hemos lanzado durante el año 2021. Estamos atendiendo 4 puntos en Perú, en el centro del país, y 2 puntos en Colombia, en el norte y en el sur. Y la idea es abrir 40 corresponsales con antena, por lo tanto con cobertura digital, en el año 2022 en la región, y vamos a seguir apostando fuertemente por esta iniciativa.
Hablando de conectividad, ya tenemos a Greta otra vez aquí.
So Anna, I'm sorry, I need to, that's fantastic. So the 450 million not connected is now 440 million. That's perfect. Thank you very much.
That is the intention.
Yeah. Well done, well done, well done.
Thank you.
Vamos ahora a Londres, donde nos espera Neil. Quizá las constelaciones satelitales, palabra que he aprendido yo hoy, en empresas como OneWeb, cuyo director nos acompaña desde Londres, Neil, quieren convertir en proveedores de Internet y lo que quieren hacer es ofrecer conexión de banda ancha a todo el planeta, incluyendo a personas que no están conectadas por encontrarse en zonas aisladas. La primera pregunta es clara: ¿en qué consiste esta nueva tecnología, Neil?
At the simple level, the technology is you have a ground station, you have satellites in space at low Earth orbit, so the ours fly about 1,200 kilometers, and then you have user terminals. And essentially, you connect a fiber network into the ground station, and the ground station essentially projects the fiber-like connectivity via the satellites down to the ground. And so far we have deployed just over half our constellation during the course of this year. That's 358 satellites. And we will be turning on the constellation by the end of this year to initially serve the polar regions from 50 degrees north to the North Pole. And by the end of next year, we will complete the constellation and coverage around the entire world. So let me give you a sense of what that means in practice. It means in practice that people anywhere on the planet can do this, can talk via video, and with no delay. They can use applications, education applications, healthcare applications. They can download videos. They can connect, using low latency applications to extend their businesses anywhere around the world. And we're starting off in Alaska this winter, because Alaska is a very demanding environment, and our hypothesis is that if we can make it work in Alaska, we can make it work anywhere in the world. And we're starting off by connecting communities in Alaska where there is very little connectivity, which will enable people in those connectivity in those communities which have no connectivity to essentially communicate with the rest of the world for healthcare, for education, but also just for live their life and be part of the digital economy.
¿Y por qué esta tecnología puede solucionar el problema de llegar hasta la última milla, algo que otras tecnologías no han conseguido?
I think that the connectivity, based on my travels and talking to customers around the world, and I should be clear here, our customers are telephone companies, generally speaking, or local ISP providers. We work with them because they know the local markets much better than we do. And what we can do is help them serve their customers better and fill the holes in their network. But I would say, again, based upon my, going around the world and talking to customers, the connectivity problem is in some parts of the world so acute, it's going to require every tool in the toolbox to solve it. Whether it's conventional fiber cable, laying more fiber, whether it's what we do, whether it's what some of our competitors do, or existing geostationary satellites, it's going to require everybody to participate, and for all those tools to be used in unison to solve this connectivity problem.
Entonces, entiendo que esto sería una ventaja para poder conectar a los más vulnerables, los que ahora no están conectados, Neil.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you that, here at OneWeb, the mission of the company is to connect the unconnected. And we have 500 people in this company, 300 telephone engineers and rocket scientists who are absolutely passionate about this mission. And now we have people on the ground around the world and working with local telephone companies and local partners to bring this to reality. So we're very, very excited indeed.
Muchas gracias, Neil. Mats, GSMA representa a empresas como OneWeb, como hemos visto, y a sus socios. Y más allá de lo que está comentando Neil, ¿cuáles son los ingredientes necesarios para que lo público y lo privado converjan y puedan sacar adelante este tipo de proyectos?
Yeah, maybe I should just say that OneWeb is a good partner. We see OneWeb as a complement to our service, so it's no animosity, as Neil said. I think what I would just like to refer to back what Greta said on the trust. Economic recovery, of course, is important as well, but trust factor needs to be there, that I do trust my device, I do trust the privacy, I do trust going out on the internet. Just as an example, on the video we saw, the lady walking in and she gave her mobile number to the man. In many parts of the world, that has been tried and has been abandoned because of the man taking the phone number and harassing the woman afterwards. So some operators have chosen to give proxy numbers instead. So the woman walking into the shop gives a proxy number. That is just a fake number, but it's linked to the mobile phone number in some parts of the world. So trust, I think, is absolutely important. Public and private partnership, Greta referred to it, and I've talked a lot about it. Quite difficult, but it's an absolutely necessity in order to bridge the usage gap. We need governments to help us push services. You were talking about digital inclusion, being part of the economy. There's 1 billion people without an identity. 1 billion people without an identity. Now, they are not part of the economy, so we need to make sure that governments take away red tape, make sure that they push us as individuals to use connectivity. Use it. Usage is the word. Trust is the second word.
Muchas gracias, Mats. Greta, bienvenida de nuevo, que habíamos perdido tu conexión. Me gustaría preguntarte de tu experiencia y poniendo como ejemplo a las microfinanzas, ¿hasta dónde tienen que llegar estas instituciones para eliminar las barreras y seguir adaptándose a la era digital?
Yeah, thank you very much. And sorry to drop off there for a minute. I really like what Matt's saying about both public-private partnerships and trust. And I think we still have a long way to go in the microfinance space, both in terms of connecting people, not just with phones, but an important part of what the GSMA's members have done in other parts of the world is building out kind of cash in, cash out capability that completely underpins all of the mobile financial services we have in places like Africa and in low-income segments in places like South Asia and in Latin America as well. And so I think we do really need to see a big push on getting that kind of cash in, cash out infrastructure more available to people in more marginal areas. And that's expensive to build and it's challenging to run. And so I do think public-private partnerships and thinking creatively about how we get that access out to people is going to be really important. Then I think there's a real challenge for the microfinance sector because the microfinance sector emerged before digital was a thing even. And so MFIs have really struggled to make the transition to digital in many parts of the world. I think BBVA is ahead of many, and we really need to see more of this. As we come out of this pandemic and the huge economic hit it has placed on emerging markets, we have got to get productive credit reasonably priced into many different markets. And I think most MFIs have still not really made the transition to fully risk-based lending and pricing based on the data on their customers. That's locking us into high-touch business models that really may not be fit for the future in a world of fintech and digital banks, as we're starting to see emerge all over the place. And if you look around, productive credit in many parts of the world, Latin America included, is missing in action. We have just a woefully short supply of banking services for the poor. And so I think MFIs need to think pretty hard about what the next wave is going to be and how they get out to critical mass in a number of markets. And I think that really requires a pretty fundamental rethink of the microfinance business model that takes into account the challenges of serving the low-income segment. And so we need to look at issues like sourcing reasonably priced wholesale funding in many, many markets, hedging Forex risk, bringing operating costs right down through digitization and data-driven analytics, which we see the fintech world doing, but the microfinance world has been slow to adopt. Capital and ownership structures need another look, as does governance. I think this is particularly true in Africa, but it's true everywhere. And digitization has been a particular challenge. CGAP, my former colleagues at CGAP recently conducted a survey of digital innovations that had any meaningful impact on customer value. And frankly, they had to look pretty hard to find quantifiable examples of this. So I think for microfinance to have a future, it really needs to embrace digital, embed this into the business model, maintain that focus on the poor and responsibly providing those services. But we've got to find ways of more rapidly bringing digital into the mix. And I know it's not easy. And, I know BBVA has been really focused on this for a long time and has made a lot of progress. But, we've got to do this across the board because to me, this is a pretty existential challenge for the industry going forward. Digital is going to move forward very fast, and if the industry doesn't get on that train, they're going to be left behind.
Muchas gracias, Greta. Pues Javier, cuéntanos qué otros proyectos y otras iniciativas tiene la Fundación ahora en este sentido.
Sí, antes de contestarte, sí me gustaría decirle primero a Greta siempre darle las gracias porque hemos aprendido mucho con ella al frente de SIGAP, nos han aportado mucho, y simplemente señalar que en ese informe de SIGAP en el que hablaban de entidades de microfinanzas que habían incorporado la transformación digital de una manera novedosa, figuraba Banca Mía en ese informe con la transformación digital que hemos hecho en Colombia, ¿no? Como uno de los ejemplos, ¿no? Bueno, nosotros, al margen de lo que hemos hablado antes de las antenas, evidentemente creemos muy firmemente en el tema de familiarizar a estas personas con la tecnología, a darles capacitación y darles formación. En ese sentido, estamos desarrollando una plataforma in-house desde Colombia, que vamos a llevar a República Dominicana y a Chile próximamente, en el que formamos en habilidades digitales, desde lo más básico hasta llegar al marketing digital y al acceso a redes a los emprendedores. Hablamos de fortalecimiento empresarial, hablamos de educación financiera y a futuro seguiremos incorporándole ese tipo de componentes. Señalar también que, por ejemplo, en Chile hemos lanzado un canal en YouTube con nuestra entidad Fondo Esperanza, que se llama Aprendo y Emprendo, en el que hacemos unas píldoras de cómo la digitalización puede ayudar a mejorar un pequeño emprendimiento, un pequeño negocio, ¿no? En ese sentido, estamos invirtiendo mucho en esos son vídeos formativos con dibujos muy sencillos para ayudar en las reuniones de la banca grupal que hacemos en Chile a que estas señoras puedan empezar a visualizar qué les puede dar el Internet en sus negocios. También me gustaría resaltar que con el Trust de las Américas, que es la fundación de la Organización de Estados Americanos, estamos incursionando en un primer programa piloto a través de su programa Poeta, que trata de identificar cuáles son, hacer un diagnóstico del nivel de habilidades digitales que tienen los emprendedores y tratar de hacerles una formación que es virtual y también presencial, para tratar de hacer ese upscaling en lo que es la digitalización de sus negocios, ¿no? Aquí señalar que este programa Poeta lo estamos lanzando muy enfocado a desplazados que huyen del conflicto, de la guerrilla, etcétera, y migrantes venezolanos para atender la diáspora venezolana que está entrando en Colombia. Y sí que me gustaría decir que estamos empezando ya a crear productos en los que la formación digital es un elemento básico fundamental. Recientemente en Perú hemos lanzado un producto que se llama Emprende Mujer, que consiste en un crédito para capital de trabajo, incorpora un seguro que cubre varias contingencias en la empresa que pueda suceder en su pequeño negocio, pero además contingencias médicas propias de las mujeres, como atender posibles situaciones con indemnizaciones en caso de algunos cánceres de mama o de cuello uterino, etcétera, y además que lleva implícito junto con el crédito esa formación básica en habilidades digitales. Creo que el futuro va por ahí, incorporar esto como algo nosotros no solo nos dedicamos a hacer crédito o a hacer ahorros, sino que tenemos que meter el tema de la formación en las habilidades digitales para atraer a estas personas, como decía antes, al siglo XXI. Y me gustaría decir también que tenemos algunas iniciativas con compañías telefónicas en los países, como nos ocurre con Claro en República Dominicana o con WOM en Chile, en el que estamos facilitando la financiación de teléfonos inteligentes como parte de financiación de activos productivos para el negocio, en el que estamos ofreciendo a estas personas la posibilidad de adquirir un teléfono inteligente con un plan de datos asequible y también, una vez más, con formación digital. En el caso de Chile, hemos hecho una primera iniciativa en la que hemos distribuido 5.000 tarjetas a 5.000 emprendedoras de banca grupal, o sea, de la base de la pirámide, en la que por 6 meses tienen acceso al Internet de una manera gratuita, y nuestros asesores en esos reuniones grupales están empezando a trabajar con ellas para que se vayan familiarizando. Creo que el futuro va por allí, creo que va básicamente de formación, creo que va de integración en los productos y de valor añadido a lo que estamos haciendo.
Pues muchas gracias, Javier. Muchas gracias a todos. Despedimos ya a Nil y a Greta. Os despedimos a vosotros también. Os pedimos que regreséis a vuestros asientos porque vamos a continuar con el evento de hoy. Muchas gracias. Un aplauso a todos. Gracias.